Hey guys, I hope everyone's having a good Thanksgiving today. Hope you're eating a lot, hanging out with friends and family, and just having a good time, maybe watching some football. So I hope everyone is safe today and having a good time at Thanksgiving dinner. But today I want to talk about something a little different. Usually I talk about a lot of Nintendo stuff, Switch stuff, things like that, which is great. I enjoy it. I'm a fan of technology, and the Switch is the most interesting thing right now because there's a lot of stuff we don't know about. We have to speculate and figure out. But today I want to talk about another company. I want to talk about Sony, and I want to talk about their PS4 Pro because there's a lot of people on the internet. Obviously, some of them may be fanboys of, Microsoft or fans of Microsoft, and then the other half is probably, Sony fans yelling back. But there is this interesting perception that the PlayStation 4 Pro was rushed to get to market first. Now, first I want to say, looking at the Pro, for the money, for $400, you can't really do much better when it comes to 4K gaming. It's very difficult. 4K is very difficult for a lot of video cards in computers to reach unless you put a lot of money into it. Even now, most games still struggle at 4K with, $250 to $300 video cards. I know the RX 480 is really trying to change that right now from AMD, but even that has some problems at 4K. That's a lower budget card that has a lot of power to it. So I assume it looked like Sony was basically realizing that 4K is where they wanted to go, and they put this system out that has some cool features to it, and we'll go over that in a second. Right now I want to go over specs real quick. I'll put them up on the screen, and that'll give us the PS4 original, the Slim, and then the Pro. So let's take a look at these specs here. So as you can see, we have the PS4 Slim, and the PS4 Pro. Now, looking across, the Slim and the regular one, they're going to be pretty similar, obviously. The Slim has a couple extra features, like it has wireless AC, which is really cool. That's actually gives you a much better wireless signal, essentially, and much faster, better range too. So that's good. And but going down from there, let's look what we really want to see here, which is the PS4 Pro. The CPU, from what I can tell, is basically the same CPU used in the PS4, the 8-core Jaguar from AMD, and it's clocked higher, because they will need a little more power out of it, at least, if they're not going to change the CPU completely. I assume they did not change the CPU for a couple reasons. One, they were probably on a time crunch to get this thing out the door, so they needed to keep that in there rather than produce a bunch of CPUs, obviously, to then replace it with. And it's a lot easier to just clock it higher. They could have probably done that in the back-end system BIOS at a system level, and more than likely that's what happened, because like I said, when you go to 4K, you need a little more processing power. That power may also be used to help with the upscaling features. So that's interesting that they did opt for the same CPU. A lot of times you change up the CPU with essentially the video card if it gets stronger. But from there, we can look over. It does have 8 gigs of DDR5 RAM, same as the other one. But what's really cool, and a lot of people I think are missing this, it's actually incorporating a gig of DDR3 system memory. And what that's going to do, it's more stable RAM for things like system tasks. It's slower, but it's definitely better suited for system tasks. So things like if you're watching Netflix, if you're surfing the web on it for whatever reason, if you're in the store, and then you go out to a game, it does not have to then either store it in that same memory that the game's going to be used for resolutions and textures. It'll leave it in that 1 gig of DDR3 RAM and then use the 8 gigs specifically for games. This was a really cool idea for Sony. There's also a chance that they needed a lot of that RAM for the 4K gaming, but what's cool is it'll free up some extra RAM to be used for the very massive resolution that 4K is. And it's not listed here, but I do know this for a fact. It also has a SATA 3 connection. I was very confused why the PS4 went with, when it first came out, a slower SATA connection. It didn't make any sense to me because, I mean, higher speed SATA connections will give you things like better texture loading, like pop in. You'll see it occasionally with PS4, textures will pop in, but with the Pro you don't get that anymore. More than likely that's from that SATA 3 connection that's able to transfer basically data faster between the hard drive and the system. And since we're also loading everything onto the hard drive now, it's a little odd that wasn't in the PS4 in the first place. SATA 3 was so commonplace even when the PS4 came out, it didn't make any sense to me. But it's now in the Pro, and people have noticed it. Load times are faster. Games like Hitman, for example, that just got support recently, the loading is faster. If you end up having to restart a mission, you'll see texture won't have to pop in on the Pro. That could also be from the CPU helping out, but more than likely it's because of that SATA 3 connection. So overall, looking at this PS4 Pro system, it is a better system. It's also $100 more, but because you get that 4K upscale, and that's another thing we're going to talk about here in a second, the upscaling. Because you get that 4K upscale, it makes this system much more valuable. Now, the system doesn't actually really render 4K native most of the time. There are games that can. Last of Us, for example, even though it is a last generation game, does do native 4K. It also supports HDR, but the original PS4 got a patch, so now it also does HDR. But older games will do that. Indie games will also be native 4K. But when we get into bigger games, like the Resident Evils, like the Horizon Zero Dawn, they're not going to be able to do 4K all of the time. And it kind of uses a technique that I've been following for a little while now. I think it's a really, really cool technique that Forza Horizon used, the new one, and that's dynamic scaling. And it's a really cool idea because what happens is we wouldn't really notice when we're playing. But what happens is when a lot of stuff is happening, let's say you're playing Horizon Zero Dawn and all of a sudden this massive dinosaur comes on screen and you're trying to kill it and all this stuff's exploding and the system starts to chug a little bit. Well, the instant that system starts chugging, the resolution will then drop from, let's say, 4K down to 1440p, and then it will use its checkerboard upscale technique to keep the image looking relatively the same, so you won't really notice while you're playing. Forza used this on computers as well. They called it, it was like dynamic resolution, essentially. It was in the options. But that basically means that while you're playing, it will drop resolution as it needs to, and then when less stuff is happening, it will then jump right back up to 4K, if it can do native, and then it won't have to upscale anymore. Again, it does it on the fly. It's actually a really cool technique, and I think it'll actually help out a lot of games in the future. But the idea is really cool, and I think they'll start incorporating that into pretty much all the games for the PS4 Pro. Again, the actual people who make these, the developers, they have to incorporate a patch. The Pro is not out of the box ready for some of these games. Some of these developers have to essentially go back and do it, and I don't know if a lot of them want to do that. I think a lot of the developers want to kind of push forward into their games. Sony may be kind of, leaning on them to do it, so a lot of them are, but I remember CD Projekt Red was talking about how they don't want to do it for Witcher 3 because they want to move on to other stuff and not worry about supporting one system out of all the systems that they support. And, I think that's smart on their part because they probably want to move on to the next Witcher series or whatever project they have. So you may see some developers just not add support. And if there is no Pro support that they add, the Pro, as we've seen in some cases, a lot of reports, it actually runs worse at times because it's not optimized to use that CPU. It's not optimized to use that GPU. And what happens is, a lot of times when people are saying, the way the GPU is set up, it can actually turn off, essentially half the GPU can kind of just turn off, and it'll run just like a regular PS4. So even though you have a Pro, it will basically just run like that normal PS4 that's been out since 2013. And again, it's a little odd to do that considering you have the power and you can at least make the frame rate better. Granted, the PS4 Pro is an awesome 1080p machine. If they optimize it for it, I see no reason that you can't get 1080p 60 frames, no sweat, even with better looking textures and everything. So if you have a 1080p TV and you start seeing these patches come out, it might be worth getting a Pro because you'll get these better frame rates, you'll get these better textures, and there's little extra bells and whistles on the screen. So the big question a lot of people have asked me at this point is, was it rushed? And I have to say, no. I don't think the PS4 Pro was rushed. I think they wanted to get it out the door, but I don't think they made a lot of recessions with the technology used to get it there. I do think it's a little odd, to be honest with you guys, that they didn't wait because Microsoft left the door open. They said, hey, Scorpio is not coming this year. It's coming next year. It's coming a year and a half from now. It's coming in holiday 2017. This was at E3 they were talking about this. They left the door open for Sony to be like, okay, we can wait and we can make that 6 teraflop monster that they're making. We can do it too. But I think Sony has a different strategy here. I think they, wanted to be first to market, much like how Microsoft was with the 360, and that really helped them kind of hold the PS3 off for 8 years or 7 years or something. I mean, it took forever for the PS3 to catch up. And I think they want to be the lower price system because the Xbox One Scorpio is going to come out. That's not going to be cheap, guys. That's going to be an expensive system. They've already come out and said, hey, it's going to be a premium system. You're not coming in here and buying a $400 machine with a Scorpio. You're probably buying a $500 to $600 machine here. And yes, it will probably be a beast, but some people are going to look at that and say, well, these games that are upscaled with, they won't know checkerboarding, but they'll say these are upscaled to 4K. They're both 4K machines, right? So why don't I buy this one over here that's now marked down to $300 on Black Friday, or $350 normally, then spend $500 or $600 for this one? And that's what Sony is banking on. They want to get to the point where they are the, not budget system, but the more affordable system. They'll still have 4K. They'll still have HDR lighting. They won't have that, which is still odd, they won't have that 4K Blu-ray, ultraviolet Blu-ray player, but they'll have everything else. They'll have Netflix streaming at 4K, and you know, all the entertainment stuff will be there. They'll even have their Sony View, which I'm sure will then be 4K by then as well, for their TV service. But that's Sony's strategy right now, is to be first to market, which they are, and provide a service that is similar to Microsoft Scorpio at a more affordable rate. So I think the strategy is good on Sony's part, because obviously the idea here is to sell systems and make money. And Sony is seeing that, and honestly, I think we'll get, this is a half step, obviously. And I'm concerned that in another 2 years, we'll get another half step, and then another half step. And it's weird the way these console generations are going, because they feel like computers now. They feel like I had bought a computer, and then 3 years later I was like, I'm going to put a new video card in this. That's very similar to what they did with this Pro. So, you know, it's not rushed. I'm a little concerned about the console generations. I think they could keep getting more out of this, but I guess the market was screaming 4K, 4K, you know, VR, VR. You know, we need better systems to run these things. And Sony was like, well, let's do it. Let's just push it out the door. 4K and VR, it's all supported. So, but the price isn't bad. You're not going to get, honestly guys, with a computer, you're not going to get a similar system for $400 with an OS, and a hard drive, and everything. It's just not going to happen. So the price is good at $400. If it was $500, I would say maybe you can build something for $600 to $700, and the price isn't that different. So, but yeah, guys, that's my PlayStation 4 Pro thoughts. Let me know what you think in the description or the comments about what you think of the PS4 Pro. Is it a good system for the money? Would you guys have bought one? And just let me know what your thoughts are, I guess, going forward on the Scorpio and the marketing thoughts and everything. But that's it for today, guys. I hope you're having a good Thanksgiving, like I said, and I will see you next time.